So let's look at a more complicated function. Okay, this is about as complicated as these graphs are going to go. Okay, this one is my vertical shift. This 2 here is my dilation. And inside the parentheses is where you need to start. The parentheses is going to give you the period, and also it's going to give you the phase shift. But you can't get it yet. You've got to do a little bit of work before you can figure this stuff out. And my suggestion is to just make some quick notes of all the transformations you're going to do before you start graphing it. So we've got some things to do to figure out here. Okay, now if the period of a tangent only goes from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, that means it has an original period of pi. All right, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Actually, let me back up. The first thing you're going to need to do here before you can even start to talk about this is to factor out a 2. This 2 right here. So I'm going to factor out a 2, and when I do that, I get 2 times x minus pi over 4. If you don't know where the pi over 4 comes, just multiply this back through. 2 times pi over 4 is going to reduce to pi over 2, and you're back to the original. Okay, so now I can start to talk about the period. The period is going to be equal to pi, which is the width, the original width of the tangent period, divided by 2. And that 2 is this value right here. Okay, so now my period is pi over 2. My phase shift, which I now know, I didn't know it before because I hadn't factored yet, the phase shift is going to be right, because it's always the opposite sign when it comes to phase shift, right pi over 4. Okay? I also have a dilation of 2. That's this thing here. That gives me a dilation of 2 and a vertical shift of 1. Okay? All right, now the first thing you want to do, get your ruler out, draw a graph. Okay? And what's going to happen is your asymptotes that are normally at pi over 2 and pi over 2 have now got to shrink in. They're going to go to pi over 4 and negative pi over 4. Okay? Because your period can only total a pi over 2. So negative pi over 4 plus pi over 4 is going to give you a total period of pi over 2. But that's not the end of the story. You also have to phase shift to the right. Okay? So, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do pi over 4, negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, pi over 4, and pi over 2. I'm going to take you on a journey of every single one of these asymptotes. So if you look at this edge of this ruler, first it's going to shrink to a period of pi over 2, and then it's going to phase shift to the right pi over 4. So I go over another pi over 4, and I find out that my asymptote, and just because it's on this line here, my asymptote is going to be right there on the origin. Okay? Let's do the other one. The other one asymptote's at pi over 2, but it gets shrunk to pi over 4 so that your period is only from negative pi over 4 to pi over 4. And then it phase shifts to the right pi over 4. And so my other asymptote ends up, well, really back where it started. Okay? And then I double check, always double check. It's so easy to make a mistake. Going from 0 to pi over 2, it has a period of pi over 2. Okay? Now, the rest is easy. Originally, the original center of the graph is at 0, 0. Okay? But it's getting shifted to the right pi over 4, and also it's getting a vertical shift of 1. So let me mark my 1 and my negative 1. So the center, the 0, 0, goes over to the right, pi over 4, and then up 1. Okay? And this is where I would then just sketch the graph. Okay? You can now repeat this. This would be 3 pi over 4, and this would be pi. We've gone another period, so we need another asymptote. And it's going to be shifted up here, and I'm going to sketch my graph like this. Okay? And you can also go back the other way, of course. And once you have it set up, you can see it's easy to just keep going and going and going. But this is theoretically going off in both directions infinitely. Okay, again, please add any comments if you'd like to see some changes, if this is confusing and you'd like to maybe have some suggestions, please add it to the Google form, whose link is at the top of the video folder. Thank you very much.